welcome to Central Texas Gardener. I'm Tom Spencer. This Halloween, it will be all treats and no tricks at the Garden Conservancy Symposium, Limestone and Water. You're sure to bring home a bag of goodies filled with designs and inspiration for the Texas garden. Today, two of the presenters, Lauren and Scott Ogden, share a few of the insights they'll be exploring. On tour, let's visit Lauren and Scott at their Austin home.
Against up-close traffic commotion, Scott Ogden and Lauren Springer Ogden temper urban necessity with botanical exploration that represents nature's harvests from around the world. As gardeners, designers, and authors, every site, including their home in Austin, depicts their philosophy of plant-driven design.
For us, I think the beginning of all this is actually looking at nature and looking at other gardens. And so we both spent a lot of time hiking through the hills, wandering along creeks, and looking at old neighborhoods and plants that grow, seeing what happens. And then we've spent time with the plants themselves, and that's the beginning of being able to create a garden, is knowing how the plants grow, knowing what they do in the wild, and being able to bring a little bit of that into your own environment.
When you accept that that really is a relationship between you, a living being, and another living being, it's completely different. And it allows for so much more complexity and change and excitement and surprise and disappointment and all that.
As plant-driven gardeners, Lauren and Scott absorb what each one says to them. In their experiments, they welcome the challenge of communication to respond to the needs of their international partners.
A plant-driven garden, or a garden that's designed with plants first, you don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to have gone to school and learned all the quote-unquote tenets of design, which we don't believe in anyway. And it just comes with loving certain plants, loving the way they look, and thinking about where would they look best in the garden with what other plants.
That's the thing that really separates a plant-driven design garden from another garden, is that the plants are what is first in mind when you lay it out.
The most important thing I'd say would be that you love it. I want there to be a love affair.
Although they consider whether the passion will be reciprocal, a plan sketch on paper doesn't work for them.
We have a really, really full garden and very layered garden, mainly because we don't have enough room. And so we have to do the fruitcake thing. So
we want it all.
It's a vertical effect. It's 3D gardening, you know?
To be honest, this garden is barely designed. It's stuffed with plants, and one of the few design features is the sedge lawn, and the reason it's here is because we knew it was going to be stuffed with plants everywhere else, and we had to have some kind of quiet place for your eye to rest, so we could have lots of plants and where we could walk. Exactly.
But since they're sensitive to how plants best cohabitate, rhythms of design naturally emerge. Some plants get the job as evergreen structure in diverse foliar renditions.
But they would be inert if we didn't have bulbs shooting through periodically after a rainstorm or in the spring.
That's right.
Or having a few kind of feathery perennials or annuals that come and bloom and then we whack them back and they disappear. Those kind of things have to happen to keep the garden exciting. Gardening is about curiosity and it's about change. A garden that's perfect all the time is a bore. Who wants that? You might as well be at a parking lot in the mall. You actually want to be able to go out the door and see something different, every week, if not every day.
The main reason you want change in the garden is it's human nature, really. If everything looks the same, you actually start to not see it.
In Texas, where plants gently unfold year-round, plant-driven design simmers and anticipates rather than bursting into simultaneous passion.
So you have what's basically sort of a sputtering of different types of plants that have their seasons. So if you don't think about seasonality and plants that come and go, you will have basically a plastic garden. One year there'll be one spot in your garden where there's 3 things that all bloom at the same time and they all look super together, and then it may never happen again. And you know, you have to be okay with unpredictability and okay with the fact that things do die and look awful often, and it's not your fault, but there's so many things that do wonderful things that you can't take credit for either.
Part of it is, real plants, like real people, aren't perfect.
When someone asked why their Clematis armandii was free of spent brown leaves, Scott responded, Lauren picked them off.
And people forget gardens don't exist without gardening. If you don't want to garden, you will never have a real garden. The other thing that's important is to get over the idea of a garden as an installation project. That's once it's done, it's done. It's never done.
I don't think everyone needs to have a layered garden or even a naturalistically modeled garden. It's really not about whether it's formal or informal or whether it's overstuffed like our garden or whether it's a little more sparse. But the main thing is that you have plants that you really enjoy.
Well, you've just visited Lauren and Scott's beautiful garden. Now they're joining us here in the studios to talk about a great symposium that's coming up at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, sponsored by the Garden Conservancy, a very important garden organization here in the United States. Welcome to the show. It's always great to have you here.
Thanks for having us back.
Yeah. Y'all are going to be speaking at the Garden Conservancy's symposium. It's called Limestone and Water. It's going to be happening on October 31st. And featured speakers, and there's kind of a theme, I guess, for the year, which is celebrating place, right?
The theme is, limestone and water, or maybe we should say this summer, limestone and occasional water, or periodic water.
Rare.
Right. But that sets the backdrop for gardening in Austin, and so that's the theme.
That's I whenever I hear limestone water, I just envision like Hamilton Pool or something like that. But limestone water and plants, right, Lauren?
Yes. Never forget the plants. That's our mission. That's our part of the symposium. We're going to be emphasizing the plant aspect of that.
And for those who maybe just tuned in and missed the introduction to Scott and Lauren, wonderful garden designers and garden authors, big advocates of vibrant plant-driven design. Plant-centric design is another way to think of it.
From our standpoint, that's the way to go, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And we're really looking forward to getting a chance to present that for an Austin audience.
Right. Now, you're going to be joined at the symposium by a couple of other really terrific speakers.
Yeah. Both of them are Texans. So we have Stephen Orr, who's a West Texan, and he's now in New York City, and he's a garden writer and a consultant. And all of us are going to be speaking about different aspects of sustainability from a regional and a local point of view. So Stephen's going to be addressing that in his way. And then we have Dylan Crane Robertson, who you all know very well as former co-partner in Big Red Sun and now on his own D. Crane Design. He's done a lot of really cool stuff around this area. And so he'll be talking about his philosophies and on garden design and creating beautiful outdoor spaces here in a sustainable way.
And Dylan is definitely a philosopher. So
yes, he is.
We'll get that.
Actually trained in philosophy.
Really?
So
yeah, that's cool. And y'all are philosophers in a way too. When it comes to you have I think a philosophy of gardening that is fresh and always invigorating when you all come on the program.
We're glad you think that. So
plant politicians.
Well, there's a little bit of politics and philosophy now, isn't there? So
there is.
Okay. Well, just to give people a little bit more idea about it, again, it's happening on the 31st at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. They can learn more about it at the gardenconservancy.org. And tell us a little bit more about the Garden Conservancy.
Well, they're a really interesting organization. They're a nonprofit that was put together about 20 years ago with the main purpose being really very much fashioned after what they've done in Europe in taking exceptional private American gardens and making them live in the future once their owners no longer can care for them and making them available for the public as educational and inspirational places. And so that's what they do.
and here in Texas, many of us have visited Peckerwood Gardens between here and Houston.
Yeah.
Absolutely spectacular space. And the thought of that not being a garden at sometimes is absolutely heartbreaking, but they're going to take that garden on, and that's the kind of space we're talking about.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah, and they do the open days thing around the country, which is they open private gardens now that are around the country that aren't usually open to people to see. And we have it here in Austin every other year.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite all-time garden events, the Garden Conservancy Open Days Tour. And they're alternating now here in Austin with these symposiums. Yeah. You're going to be focusing on, you're going to be talking about plant-driven design and your aesthetic. And this is going to be an interesting year, I think, to talk about that, given the fact that this has been the most extreme summer ever.
Right. Well, we face some of those challenges every summer because we're bi-statal. We come back and forth between Colorado and Austin, and our plants have to endure, 2 or 3 week jaunts in the summer when we're not there to care for them.
Right.
So we've pretty systematically destroyed a lot of the plants that can't handle that anyway.
Right.
But this year was certainly a test, and so it reminds us of what it takes to, when you're designing a garden, to come up with plants that'll hold things together when you're not there tending it quite as much as you want.
Well, even if you are there tending it, Scott, one thing that I've heard so often this year from across the board from so many people is they've had it. Mm-hmm. They no longer can buy into the traditional lawn and shrubs and that kind of aesthetic because they know it doesn't work. They can't, for one thing in Austin, they can't afford it. But they still want something interesting. They want something lively, and that's one of the takeaways that you all have gotten from this year, really, isn't it? The focusing on a kind of maybe a leaner aesthetic, but a vibrant aesthetic.
I don't know if our aesthetic is leaner, but it's definitely more focused on the plants that really do keep performing for us.
It's a shift. It's not actually less plants. I think it's just that we're needing to focus on different types of plants.
Okay.
And I think Austin's been starting to embrace that already, just from an aesthetic point of view, even before it became an issue with water, because people really in this town like spiky plants and they like those powerful looking desert plants, whereas a lot of other parts of Texas are like, no. So I think Austin's already ahead in that game, but I think actually those plants in a hot summer like this, they hold up really well, but they can be almost tiresome because what you are looking for is some softness. You don't want to think, you're in the Sahara.
Right.
And so what we're looking for are plants that are tough and need very little water and can stand brutal heat, but still give some kind of a sense of abundance and softness and lushness.
And who wants a garden that's just all one thing, or and not some kind of combination of the other? And when I think of y'all's gardens, I think of kind of wild abundance of textures and shapes and forms.
Yeah. Right. No, we want everything that we can possibly have that will work.
Right.
So, to put it simply,
when I said leaner aesthetic, I thought, what am I saying? I'm talking to Lauren and Scott.
Well, you can say that, but we're going to show you other options.
Plant pigs.
So,
right. Well, that's funny. But let's talk about some of the, when you talk about the kind of plants that provide that sense of, there's, I guess, a sense of structure and vibrancy that really hang in there with you. What are some of the things that you've really grown to, that have popped out for you this summer that really did that?
Well, shrub palms for sure. So we have several different kinds. The med fan palm is probably the most iconic, used here a lot in Austin.
Used a whole lot, right.
But there's also the southeastern native, the needle palm, which takes a lot of shade, dry shade, which a lot of us have.
The hardy parlor palm is another one that's a small palm that does really well, the Chamaedorea radicalis.
Real feathery and elegant and looks lush. You'd think it would need a lot of water and it's tough as nails.
So those are great. And then the other group of plants that really looks lush, even when it's as dry and hot and miserable as it can be, are asparagus ferns.
Yeah,
and
love them.
Really tough plants that looks like they really ought to be in a tropical rainforest, but that's not where they are at all.
Especially the little foxtail form.
Yeah, and then we've had so much fun when we did get the luck to get an occasional thunderstorm that would come through to have a whole bunch of rain lilies pop up, which of course they're doing with abandon right now. And that's always great too, just to have something that'll instantly revive your garden and respond.
Right, and that's, one of the joys you get after a brutal stretch like we've had this year is when you do get that final shower or everything just responds. It's like the earth has exhaled blooms,
Yeah, they've been
like
stored up and waiting
the
for
sigh
it.
of relief, and it's absolutely what's happening I drove through East Austin yesterday, saw an old house on a lot that looks like it's not been cared for in a long time, with probably about 10 to 15,000 rain lilies all blooming simultaneously. Just gorgeous sight. That little floating layer of white above the green, amazing stuff. So I think folks are going to have a good time at the symposium. It sounds like y'all are going to have a great time with your topic. I know that people will enjoy hearing you. Let me kind of walk through the basics here once again. It's going to be on the 31st.
Halloween. It's an easy way to remember it.
Yes.
Easy to remember that. So
Come in costume if you like.
Right. The Austin way.
And I understand that there's a special treat that goes along with this, which is that part of the event involves a reception at James David's garden.
That'd be the night before.
Okay.
The evening before that. For those who want to attend, they can also register to do that.
So if you want to see a garden of abundance and lots of cool plants, that is probably one of the coolest in the state of Texas, and I think folks will certainly enjoy doing that. And it's all for a good cause, too. Again, the Garden Conservancy, so people who go to the symposium, the dollars will be going to preserve great American gardens.
Right.
What could be cooler than that?
Yeah.
I hope you're going to sell your books, too.
We will have our books there, absolutely.
Right.
Okay, and the most recent one is?
Plant-driven design.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Well, Scott and Lauren, it is always fun to have you on. Some of my favorite guests on the program. You're always some sparks always when we have you on the program, so I appreciate that very much. Coming up next, it's Daphne with Down to Earth.
Hello and welcome to Down to Earth. Our question this week is again on roses, so you guys must be out there working with your roses and looking at them and enjoying them. Our viewers are wondering if it's too late to prune those now. So if you want to prune your vining roses, hopefully you did so back in the late summer, early summer, late spring, when those first bloom for you, when they finish blooming, because that is the time to prune vining roses. In the winters, when you would normally prune your cane roses and your shrub roses before they have flowered, and then your vining roses, you do want to wait. But if those are growing a little out of control for you, as they do sometimes in the summer, they get to vining and spreading out there and kind of brambling a little bit, you can go ahead and prune those back now just to keep them in shape, get them back on their trellis, maybe thread them back through some of those trellises again for yourself to get them out of the way of sidewalks or overhangs and so forth. Our plant this week is Autumn Fire Sedum. This is a great plant for our gardens here. It's a succulent. I think we'll be recommending more and more succulents as we start to deal with the drought that we have and start to want to conserve water in our landscapes. Sedums are not only good in our landscapes during the summer when it's so hot, they're also great in the winter. They're very hardy, they don't freeze, and I planted some in my yard in the middle of the 100-degree temperatures. I just couldn't wait to get out there in my new landscape bed in my new home, and they've looked great all summer. They've never wavered. During the summer, they'll have beautiful white flower heads, and the flower heads look a lot like broccoli florets. And then as the days start to get shorter, the flower heads start to turn the slightest pink before the flowers open. And then once the flowers open, as we get further and further into fall, those flowers start to turn a bright red, which is why it's called autumn fire. And so this plant in our garden blooms at a time when we may not have anything else blooming in the fall. In your garden right now, it's time to plant a tree. And when you do that, you want to dig the hole no deeper than the root ball, but you want to loosen the soil wider. You might add a little compost to the top of the soil or around the soil, but in general, don't amend your soil too much. If you plant a tree that's right for our area, it should live in the soil that you have. So you want to go ahead and be tough with that tree from the minute that you plant it. If you've ordered some bulbs through the mail order catalogs, or you've purchased them and you've purchased tulips or hyacinths, it's time to put those in the fridge and get them ready to be planted out in December. They do need 8 to 12 weeks in your refrigerator. If you have a compost pile, you might have noticed that compost, the activity in it started to slow down in the summer when we were so hot, and you might not have been able to keep enough water on it. Or you might have noticed it slow down when we got so much rain, if you got a lot of the rain like many of us here in Austin did. So it's time to turn that pile and get it active again. If you dig down into it and you notice that it's not hot, maybe there's no steam coming out, go ahead and turn it and that will get it active again. You also have time to plant some cool season vegetables and flowers. And if you do that, it's better to put transplants in the garden rather than seeds at this time. Planting seeds now, they won't have time to germinate and get started before the temperatures are a little too cool for them. Or if we have an early frost, then they will get damaged by that and you will see some trouble with that. So go ahead and out there to the nurseries and look for transplants that are nice and healthy. When you look for those, you want them to be short and stocky when you put them into your garden. That will ensure that they have not been in their containers too long and they'll take off nice and good for you. For more tips or to get in touch with your extension office and ask a question, visit klru.org/CTG.
Thanks, Daphne. Now let's check in with Trisha Shirey for Backyard Basics.
When we go to the nursery, we're faced with a lot of choices, and sometimes it's a little difficult to know which plant is the better choice for our garden. So I want to give you some tips on what to look for when you're shopping for plants. Now, this chive plant has probably been in the nursery for a while. I notice it's got some weeds that have come up. There's a lot of dead leaves, and when I look at the root system of the plant, they're really twisted and wound around. Now, that plant will definitely thrive. I would pull these roots out and kind of separate them a little bit so that I'd actually remove some of those so that the plant can get off to a good start. And I'd cut off all of the dead leaves and pull out the weeds before I planted it, and it'll thrive, but I'd rather choose one that hasn't been sitting in that pot for quite so long. These basils, for example, this basil is a nice healthy plant, but when you look closely, it's actually got 6 plants in this one little 4-inch pot, and that's just too crowded. Before I planted that, I'd take some of these basil plants all the way to the ground. It's really too large to try to separate these plants at this point, so take those in the kitchen, use them in your cooking, and plant. I would put no more than 2 and probably 1 basil in one space. Now, this is a plant that's been in the nursery for a while. It's got 4 or 5 plants in here. It's got woody stems, flowers, seeds. That basil's been around a little too long. Again, it would probably grow and thrive, but you'd do much better with the other plant. Here's 2 hop leaves oreganos. We might tend to go for the plant with the flowers on it, but really the one that's not blooming yet is the better choice. This one with the flowers is very root bound. It's just a solid mass of roots here. The plant's been in the pot a little too long. So generally things that are already blooming in a 4-inch pot are a little old. They're not the best choice. The plant will get off into producing more roots and more leaves a lot more quickly if they are not root bound in the pot. So just a little easier to get going in your garden. Now here's a couple of dill plants. This one it's a little bit smaller, but it's only got 3 plants in the pot, so it's not going to be quite as stressed. I would still cut one of those down and plant the other 2 in the garden. Take the one down and put it in your cooking. This dill, though, has maybe a dozen plants, but in the pot, it's going to be easy to divide that, plant this as a section and plant this as a section. And when the plants are a little bit smaller, it's easy to separate them and still plant them in different spots in the garden. But once they get up kind of tall, it's difficult to do that. Now, this is a mint plant that's got really nice, fresh, big leaves. This one has some old woody stems, a little bit smaller leaves. Same mint, but this one's been around in the nursery, I guarantee you, quite a bit longer. So both will grow, but this one, again, is going to get off to a better start and be a little easier to manage. Sometimes you can find discounts in a bargain rack with some of the plants that have been around a little longer, and you'll have to do a little bit more TLC with them. And native plants, especially like native grasses, they have a massive root system. So when they're in a 6-inch or a 1-gallon pot, they tend to get distressed pretty quickly. So sometimes the tops will look really bad, and there's just because they're so root bound, but they'll still get off to a good start in the nursery. You just have to plan ahead and know what you're getting into. and be ready to do the care and division of the roots that's needed to get your plants off to a good start and get them growing happy.
Check out klru.org/CTG for more tips, online video, and our weekly blog. Next week, get a preview of the Master Gardener's Tour. Until then, I'll see you in the garden. Visit klru.org/CTG to learn more about today's program, upcoming events, and to sign up for our electronic newsletter. Check out John's how-to tips and visit Trisha's Corner for ideas inside and out. Get growing at klru.org/CTG.